All right. Well, we do have a small change to the agenda here. Luckily, Jonathan Giret, who's representing Elite Agri Solutions, is here to talk to you about great grants. Because honestly, if I can find any untapped money that I can use, I want it. And this is where Jonathan is the expert. So thank you for joining us today. I'll let you take over.
Thank you for having me. So I manage Elite Agri Solutions. We're based out of Glencoe, so basically right between London and Chatham. Our main services are grant writing and business planning and support. We also offer nutrient management and safety training and consulting. So our vision is sort of being a one-stop shop for a lot of the tasks that most farmers don't want to take on. So we have farmers all the way from Essex to Ottawa and up into Northern Ontario. But for programs like the Poultry Fund here, we'd be happy to serve farmers across the country. So the Poultry and Ag on-farm investment program was established to mitigate the impacts of the CPTPP trade deal. It's going to provide $647 million over the next 10 years. The basic cost share is going to be 70% for most producers, but if a producer was under 35 years old as of January 1st, 2021, they're eligible for 85%. So they're not going to get any more funding than any other producer. They'll just have to spend less to get it. So what does it cover? Under increasing efficiency or productivity, new barns, expansions, renovations, manure storages, telehandlers, skid steers, Ventrex, loaders, manure spreaders, and we're even trying a few cab tractors. Under improving on-farm food safety and biosecurity, some projects we've pursued so far would be blower units, wash bays, pressure washers, foggers, straw storage, and feed milling. Under improving environmental sustainability, and these are some projects I'm looking at taking on myself, solar panels for net metering, and the project I've got on the list for next year is shifting to my barn to a renewable energy source, so something like a log boiler to heat the entire structure. And composters would also be eligible under this stream. Responding to consumer preferences, this would be anything like improving animal welfare. So barn upgrades, enrichment systems, new controllers, fans, heat exchangers, adopting alternative housing systems, transitioning to organic, or even shifting to modular loading. Retroactivity, this is something that's different than most of the grants we pursue. It goes back to when they originally announced that there would be compensation. So that's March 19th, 2019. So if a farmer built a barn back in 2019 or 2020, or had eligible costs like telehandlers or other equipment like that, renovations, we can go back and capture those costs, put in a claim, and try to get some funding back without spending any additional money. So some things we should note that aren't covered: you can't purchase quota with this program. You can't purchase any flocks or animals with it. And this line in particular is interesting. So tractors, loaders, including skid steers that are not related to equipment or related equipment, if not primarily for poultry and ag production. So this is where it gets interesting. How do you define what's not primarily for poultry production? So skid steers, telehandlers, that's a perfect shoe and fit. But say you've got a loader that's going to be dealing with all your manure. Is that going to be covered? We've got several applications in right now to try to test it out. General farm use costs such as pickup trucks will never be covered. Used equipment purchased through private sale is not eligible. So you couldn't buy a telehandler off me for your farm, but you could buy it off of, say, a full line dealer or somebody like that. Cost to replace equipment on a like-for-like basis isn't covered. So if you've got plywood walls, want to remove it, put up new plywood, that's not going to be eligible. But if you want to remove it, insulate, and put up something like Marvec, that would be an option. Purchasing land or other farms aren't going to be eligible. Bartering, so if you horse trade for a project, you can't get a cost share back on that. And in-kind contributions aren't covered either. So say you've got an operation with 3 or 4 licenses, maybe across different animal streams, you can link those all together if you want to. The only thing to note is if you link all of them together and start pursuing funding, once that funding's sort of allocated or some of the money comes out, it's impossible or unlikely that you'll be able to unlink those licenses. Stacking limits, this is where things sort of get fun from the grant writing side. So most of these programs allow stacking as long as the funding's coming from different places. So for many of our customers who we've been pursuing grants for multiple years, we're able to go back with grants we've already pursued, paperwork's already on file. So for example, we had a client who got $50,000 through CAP to build a wash bay on their farm. Through PEFIP, we were able to go back and claim another $60,000. That's what he was eligible for. So on that total project over a couple of years, we got $110,000 out of $400,000 cost shared. So only 27.5% of that total project, which is eligible for stacking. So some programs you might want to consider stacking with the poultry fund would be agricultural clean technology program. So that's where the boiler units, that's where solar panels would fit. And then the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, that's where anything animal welfare and new construction would fit. But both of those, you have to have approval before you incur costs. So if you were thinking out to 2023, there is a potential that you could stack between those programs. Intergenerational farm transfers. So the funding is not transferable to a producer that did not hold quota as of January 1st, 2021. So if I buy quota off you today, I'm not eligible to get any funding or any cost share on those quota units that I purchase. But if you transfer them to a child, there is a system to transfer that. The current backlog of projects, only a small percentage of our projects have actually been paid out. So it looks like the 2021 fiscal year was quickly maxed out as far as funding that was available. From everything I've seen, it looks like the 2022 backlog should be moved through very quickly once they hit next year's funding. One thing I'm looking for, I call this purple unicorns, is looking for producers who have sold quota mid to late 2020 or into 2021. So from everything I see, it's as of quota holdings as of January 1st, 2021. If that farmer sold quota after that date, that funding can't go to the next person, which means that incentive is still there for them. They likely don't know. So if they sold out a quota, they were eligible as of January 1st. They probably don't know that that money's going to die in this program. And I'd love to get a hold of a few of those people to test that out. So to recap, we serve all of Ontario for our main services. We'd be happy to serve anybody across Canada for the Poultry and Egg On-Farm Investment Program. Our main services are grant writing, business support, nutrient management, and safety training. Any questions?
Well, it was the quickest segue to questions I've ever heard, Jonathan. Thank you so much. I like the purple unicorn. I think I'm going to call it the purple cockerel now, just for kicks.
Totally fair.
Than a hen to me. Right now, I don't have any popping in, but maybe you could just give me a quick example. Stacking, I think, is one of those things that I didn't understand coming into this, but now that I've heard a little about it, basically, if I apply to one program with you, and then that activity becomes eligible under another program, who notifies who? Am I the one who has to keep track of that? Or is that where you were saying you would reach out to me?
That's where we sort of get excited. So I try to find that happy balance between harassing a farmer and keeping them in the loop. But if I know there's a project that they're eligible for, we're emailing them. If a program comes out that's interesting, so say it's a CAP program, I'm calling, emailing, texting every farmer I have just to say, this is what's eligible. Do you have a project? And that's where we've sort of evolved as a company, where in the early years, we were a little bit responsive as we were trying to figure out what programs were available, where now we're starting to almost get into a bit more of a business planning approach, where several of our farmers, we would have the next few years mapped out so we know what we're trying for. And if we don't get funding this year, maybe we can try again. And then once we line up that funding, say for clean tech, we can try to swing on the CAP programs as they become announced or released.
I do have one of my friends here in the chat asking a question saying they don't think that the new barn entirely is covered. Is it a whole barn or individual items inside the barn, like a controller that you were referring to?
I have a number of applications in where we put in on all costs. Now, if you're building an entire barn, you're going to quickly max out any funding that's there. We've got several applications where we put in for the entire structure, and I made the argument on stocking densities. So I've got at least one at this moment that's been paid out. Maybe they nitpicked what we put in, but it was a $400,000 incentive. We put in for $1 million+ barn and argued on stocking densities and were accepted.
I love that. And if I contacted you today because I just found out during this webinar that something was eligible or I'm interested in applying in something eligible, what's the lead time? How long before I get an appointment? How long before I should be bringing in my information?
We can do most everything online. One thing we changed last year is I'd love to go out to each farm and meet each producer if possible. So if they're within Southern Ontario, I'd like to get out within a week and a half to meet everybody. From there, everything's online. And we can quickly get on the application. We've got people that are specialized specifically for this and sort of live in the poultry fund and then help us on other projects as they come up. The lead time as far as getting approved is touchy because that's dependent on the program. So if we look at my farm, I was the first application we put in for everybody. I applied for solar panels for 2022, received nothing back, had a skid steer that blew up last year. So I bought a telehandler, resubmitted on that. I still have nothing back. So that's where, from everything I see, funding ran out. And I think there'll be a ton of approvals and contribution agreements going out in the next few weeks or soon, hopefully.
I like that. Sooner is better than later. And I'm not going to lie, if you know about money that I'm eligible for, please don't hesitate to harass me. That's kind of what I would love to hear about, Jonathan. It's quite the opposite of most phone calls I get. Well, I will thank you again. As we said, Jonathan's information is up here. You can give him a quick Google search too to find out more. Thank you for joining us and telling us how to get the money into our operations that we so sorely need to expand and continue.
Thank you for having me.